What is he wearing on his head? Ik heb keine Ahnung. I'm wearing my war hat because we're going to tell war stories. Mein Gott! You guys realize I can hear you. I'm right here. And I always wear my war hat before we tell war stories. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. And as I said before, based on a suggestion, I'm going to do more smiling and we're just going to tell some funny stories. But before we get started, please like, subscribe, share with your friends. Hopefully you enjoy this. If you dislike this, I really don't care because I'm just having a good time doing these videos. Hang on. It looks kind of fun, but it's really seriously uncomfortable, so we're going to go without that. But the basis of this is, this one time in band camp. Well, this is more of this one time on jump status. But it's actually going to be a few different stories. I wrote kind of a quick list of what I wanted to talk about, but I'm not going to go back through exactly what it means to go through airborne school. There's a link in the description from the channel General Discharge that actually does a breakdown of airborne school in all 3 weeks. The ground week, tower week, and jump week. It's a 3-week long course to become airborne qualified. And it's 3 weeks or some depending on jump week with weather. And when I went through airborne school, it was one of those classes. It was the first class that had a chance to graduate on time in a few months because a lot of airborne operations have to do with weather. If the weather's not right, then you can't jump. So my class was we made it through ground week and tower week. Then when we got to jump week, we jumped on Monday, we jumped on Tuesday. So we had 3 jumps left to make of the 5 you have to make to graduate. And weather was supposed to be coming in, so the brilliant decision was made that we were going to jump 2 times during the day and 1 time at night on Wednesday. So we'd finish our 5 jumps and we were guaranteed to graduate on time. And that was when I learned doing repeated airborne operations in one day suck. But we did it and we graduated on time. And yeah, we were really tired after that night. And I ended up on shoot shakeout detail, which is a whole different thing, where basically it is exactly what it sounds like. You end up with all the parachutes at the rigger shed, which is like a big warehouse. And you hook them up to these devices and you roll them up in the air or pull them up in the air on a pulley. And you basically shake all the debris out of them so that they won't get damaged. And yes, it takes hours and it is no fun. Now you have basic airborne school and you also have a thing called Jumpmaster school. And that's going to be important for a couple of these stories because when you go to Jumpmaster school, at a minimum you have to have 12 jumps and a year on jump status. You take a pre-test and you go to the school. In the school you do a nomenclature test based on all the equipment. They'll hold up a piece of equipment, you have to write down what it is. You can have some spelling errors, but you cannot pluralize anything that's singular. And if you're a bad speller, as I am, that's a really paranoid part of the process. You also go through pre-jump, which is where you actually go through. It's a few pages long, but it's all the training you do before a jump, and you've got to recite it from memory. You have a little card that you can use. Certain things have to be repeated verbatim, and you have to touch on everything in there the right way. Then you do what they call practical work in the aircraft, which is where you go through your actions in the aircraft as a jump master up to the point of exiting jumpers and then you jump. It's a really good course. And then the last part of it is jump master personnel inspection, where you actually have to pass a test where you inspect 3 paratroopers in 5 minutes. And that's 1 combat equipped jumper, so they got a rucksack on, and 2 Hollywood jumpers with no rucksack. And you got to find whatever deficiencies are there. You have to call them the right way using proper nomenclature with where it sits in relation to the jumper's body. It's got a really high attrition rate. I grew up as a paratrooper knowing that as a leader you go to Jumpmaster school. If you can't check your own soldiers' equipment and you can't put them out of an airplane, then you can't be a leader in an airborne unit. So graduating from that course was a very important moment in my life, because then I can go to an airborne operation and be responsible for all the jumpers on that plane, which is a really cool thing. And no, there is no extra pay for it. You get all the responsibility but no extra pay. It's kind of like getting promoted to corporal in the Army. You get all the responsibility and no extra pay. But I digress. So, funny stories about being on jump status. You had Operation Purple Dragon, and I meant to look it up earlier and I forgot. I don't remember off the top of my head what year it was. But I'm thinking, I want to say I was in Alpha Company, 3rd Battalion, 505th, so that would have been like 97, 98 time frame. And it was the largest, it was training, but it was the largest airborne operation that had been conducted since Operation Market Garden in World War II. It was all 3 brigades of the 82nd Airborne Division, along with British paras, and we were dropping into drop zones all over Fort Bragg, and if I remember right, also Cherry Point and Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. And when we went out there to get rigged up, it was misting, and there was drizzle. And the famous thing, the weather decision for an airborne operation is made based on how large the operation is. And as I said, this was the largest operation since Operation Market Garden in World War II. So in our minds, we were going to exit aircraft either way. So we get rigged up, we board the aircraft, we're flying, doors open. You can actually see this clouds, fog kind of roll into the door of the aircraft. But they have this thing called AWADS, which is Aerial or Adverse Weather Aerial Delivery System, where you have one plane that uses radar flying in front of all the rest, and they send the message back when they're over the drop zone. And to some people it seems really weird and kind of scary, but it's actually, every time I've jumped under AWADS, they were actually dead on the drop zone. So it's a good system, it works. Well, this jump in particular, I'm carrying a radio, so my rucksack is probably 100, 105 pounds. You start moving towards the door, you exit. Now, you're not supposed to lower your rucksack until you're 200 feet off the ground, or you can see the ground. So if you're jumping through clouds, depending on how high up the clouds go, that determines when you can lower your ruck. So I'm following the rules, and I'm waiting until I get through the clouds. I see the ground. I'm less than 200 feet, so I pull my release handle, and the rucksack drops like 8 inches and gets tangled up around my boots. Well, what you're taught is, if that happens, because it does happen, is kick it loose. You have 200 feet to deal with, so you have a few seconds. Well, in this case, it tangled up around my feet. I had the thought, all right, kick it loose. I hit ruck, knees, face. And my company commander, and the reason normally when I tell funny stories, I say I'm not going to give the name of the people involved because some of them were still in the Army. Well, this guy still is in the Army, but I will give his name. And the reason why is, later on in his command, he actually broke his foot on a jump and toughed it out and didn't tell anybody. Because he was he's hard as woodpecker lips. And that was Colonel Trey Rutherford, who is actually the Chief of Staff for the 7th Infantry Division right now, as far as I know. He may have changed out, I'm not sure. But he runs over to me and he's like, "Are you okay?" And I just kind of look up at him because I'm still on the ground, and I'm like, that's the softest landing I've ever had. And it was. So fast forward to after that. You have the Joint Readiness Training Center at Fort Polk, Louisiana. I'm the primary jump master for the aircraft, so I'm responsible for all the jumpers on the aircraft. I'm responsible for the assistant jump master and the 2 safeties. One of my safeties had just graduated from airborne school, or jump master school, so this was his first ever time to pull jump master duties, where he's doing JMPI, he's worried about static lines, he's checking jumpers. And we're going into the Joint Readiness Training Center, which is roughly 2 weeks where you go train. You did it once a year, especially in light units, light air assault and airborne units. And it's very pivotal to your training cycle. And for airborne units, you jump into it. You have, 173rd in Italy jumps into the Joint Multinational Readiness Training Center at Hohenfels, where I also was stationed. But at JRTC, you got brand new people. I've got a brand new safety. And this was the jump from hell. We had issues with some of the parachutes. We had issues with some of the reserves before we ever even made it on the plane. We had a reserve pop in the aircraft right before the doors open, and we got that changed out. We had a canopy release assembly, which is what holds the parachute holds the harness together and holds the parachute to the harness, come loose. And oh, by the way, once we stood everybody up because the hazards on the drop zone and winds, we made 3 passes over the drop zone. And I'm going to describe this pain to you. You're standing up. You have a 45-pound parachute, a 6 to 8 pound reserve, and 100 pounds of gear hanging off the front of you. Now, at that point, because I was still in decent shape, I weighed 190 pounds. So you had a 100-pound rucksack to the 10-pound to the 8-pound reserve to the 45-pound parachute. And you're standing there, and you're holding onto a static line, and I just want to get out of this plane. At this point, that's the whole point about being a paratrooper is, yeah, you get an extra $150 a month. Yeah, it's kind of cool. But the reason you do it is, let me go back through. There's a lot of parts about it that are great. You get to wear the Maroon Beret, or a tan beret, or a green beret, because they're all airborne qualified. But by the same token, there's moments where when you're standing in that plane and you have everything hanging off of you, and you go around the drop zone. And depending on how the Air Force is flying, it could be 5 minutes or it could be 10 minutes to make your circuit and come back across. And in that case with Fort Polk, it was 10-minute racetracks. So we had already been standing up for 30 minutes. And when they finally cleared us to exit and gave us the green light, oh my God, that's the best feeling in the world, because you watch all these paratroopers go. And at that point, as the primary jumpmaster, I got to wait for everybody to go through my door, everybody to go through my assistant jumpmaster's door, and the assistant jumpmaster to exit. And the quote is, assistant jumpmaster's gone, green light's on, and the primary jumpmaster goes. And as the last couple of guys are going out my assistant jumpmaster's door, I leaned over to the safety, who was our brigade assistant S2, and I was like, well, look at it this way. After this airborne operation, nothing else can ever be this bad in your career again. And then the assistant jumpmaster went, and then I went. And I landed off. I straightened my legs out and locked my knees, and basically, I didn't break anything, but my left leg had basically a bruise from my feet all the way up to my hip. So I limped around for the next 14 days, and it was pretty horrible. But for all the bad things that can happen in the military, there's a lot of great memories and a lot of funny memories. But I'm going to end it here. I've got plenty of more airborne stories we can talk about, or just funny stories about the military in general. Ladies and gentlemen, like, subscribe. Let's get some interaction going in the comments. That's really what I need. The channel's growing. But I like that exchange of information. So give me some in the comments. And as far as dislikes, if you don't like me telling stories, I don't really care. I have fun doing it. And there's other people that will look back on this that were in the military, and that could be soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, or now Guardians. I don't want to forget Space Force. And we'll just have a good time. Everybody have a good evening.